What if I told you that more than 2,700 years ago, an African kingdom conquered ancient Egypt? Not only that, its kings became pharaohs. They ruled one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever known. They built magnificent cities, raised hundreds of pyramids, controlled rich trade routes along the Nile, and created a kingdom whose influence stretched across northeastern Africa. Yet today, most people have never heard its name. This is the story of the Kingdom of Kush. Its heartland lay in what is now Sudan, just south of Egypt. If you visit Sudan today, you can still see the pyramid of Kush rising from the desert. In fact, Sudan is home to more pyramids than Egypt. That surprises many people. But the story of Kush is filled with surprises. It is a story of powerful kings, skilled builders, fearless warriors, and ordinary people who built one of Africa's greatest civilizations. It is also a story of friendship and rivalry, of learning from a neighbor, and one day becoming strong enough to rule that neighbor. Welcome to the African Archive, where we bring Africa's history to life through careful research and powerful storytelling. If you enjoy discovering the people, kingdoms, civilizations, and mysteries that shaped our world, subscribe and join us as we uncover the stories history should never forget. In this documentary, we'll follow the Kingdom of Kush from its earliest beginnings along the Nile to the height of its power as the land of the Black Pharaohs. We'll explore its magnificent pyramids, its remarkable cities, its rich culture, and the discoveries that are changing the way historians understand the ancient world. But this is more than the story of a forgotten kingdom. It is the story of a civilization that stood proudly beside Egypt. A civilization that left its own mark on history. And a civilization whose voice is finally being heard again. Because sometimes, the greatest mysteries are not hidden beneath the sand. They are hidden in the stories we forgot to tell. This is the story of the Kingdom of Kush. Chapter 1. A kingdom along the Nile. Every great civilization begins somewhere. For the Kingdom of Kush, it began along a river, the Nile. For thousands of years, the Nile has been one of the world's greatest rivers. Flowing through northeastern Africa, it brought life to lands that would otherwise have been dry and unforgiving. Each year, its waters helped crops grow. Its banks provided fertile soil. Its waters became roads for travel and trade. Without the Nile, the Kingdom of Kush might never have existed. Today, the heart of the ancient Kingdom of Kush lies in the country of Sudan, just south of Egypt. If you travel there today, you can still find the remains of temples, pyramids, and ancient cities that once belonged to this remarkable civilization. But thousands of years ago, this was simply the homeland of the Kushites. The people who lived here learned how to farm the land. They raised cattle. They hunted. They fished. And they traded with neighboring communities. Life depended on the rhythm of the river. When the Nile flooded, it brought fresh soil. When the waters fell, farmers planted their crops. Generation after generation, families built villages along its banks. Over time, those villages became towns. And those towns grew into a kingdom. Long before Kush became famous, another civilization had already risen to the north. Ancient Egypt. The two lands were connected by the same river. Merchants traveled between them. Ideas flowed in both directions. So did people. Sometimes they traded peacefully. Sometimes they fought. But they could never ignore one another. The land of Kush was rich in resources. Its gold was prized across the ancient world. Its forests provided valuable timber. Its people raised strong cattle. And its location made it an important crossroads for trade between Central Africa, Northeastern Africa, and the lands beyond. As Kush grew stronger, one city became especially important. Kerma. Located near the Nile, Kerma became one of Africa's earliest great cities. Its rulers governed a growing kingdom. Its markets welcomed traders from distant lands. Its craftsmen created beautiful pottery and finely made goods. Archaeologists have discovered large buildings, royal tombs, and evidence of a well-organized society. These discoveries tell us something important. Kush was not a small community living in Egypt's shadow. It was already becoming a powerful civilization in its own right. The people of Kush were building their own identity, their own traditions, their own future. But living beside a powerful neighbor brought both opportunities and dangers. As Egypt grew into one of the greatest civilizations in history, its rulers looked south, toward the land of Kush. The two kingdoms shared a river. Soon, they would share something else. A history that would shape them both forever. Chapter 2. Neighbors, Rivals, and Partners. The Nile did more than give life to the Kingdom of Kush. It also connected Kush to ancient Egypt. The two kingdoms were neighbors. They traded with one another. They learned from one another. And at times, they fought one another. For hundreds of years, goods moved up and down the Nile. From Kush came gold, ivory, ebony wood, cattle, incense, and other valuable products from the lands farther south. From Egypt came fine linen, jewelry, craftsmanship, and new ideas. The river carried much more than goods. It carried knowledge. As the two civilizations grew closer, they began to influence each other. They worshipped many of the same gods. They built temples with similar designs. Their rulers used symbols of power that often looked alike. But even as they shared ideas, each kingdom kept its own identity. The people of Kush spoke their own languages. They followed their own traditions. And they remained proud of their homeland. There were also times when peace gave way to conflict. Egyptian pharaohs wanted control of Kush's rich gold mines and important trade routes. More than once, Egyptian armies marched south. For a time, Egypt ruled parts of Nubia, the region where Kush was located. The Egyptians built forts, temples, and trading centers. They appointed officials to govern the land. Many people might think this meant the end of Kush. But history took a different path. Instead of disappearing, the Kushites adapted. They learned new building techniques. They strengthened their government. They expanded their trade. And as Egypt's power began to weaken, Kush quietly grew stronger. The city of Napata became the new center of the kingdom. It stood near a great sandstone mountain called Jebel Bako. To the people of Kush, this was a sacred place. It reminded them that their kingdom was protected by the gods. Under wise rulers, Kush became richer and more united. Its armies became stronger. Its leaders became more confident. The kingdom was no longer simply defending itself. It was preparing for something far greater. Then, in the 700s BC, Egypt entered a time of political division. Different rulers competed for power. The mighty kingdom that had once conquered Kush was no longer as strong as it had been. The rulers of Kush watched carefully. They saw an opportunity. One man believed the time had come. His name was King Piye. He dreamed of uniting the lands along the Nile. Not as an invader driven by greed, but as a ruler who believed he could restore order. In the next chapter, we'll follow King Piye as he marched north on a campaign that would change history. A campaign that would make the kings of Kush the pharaohs of Egypt. Chapter 3. When Kush ruled Egypt. By the time King Piye came to the throne, the kingdom of Kush had become strong. Its people were united. Its army was well trained. And its leaders believed their time had come. To the north, Egypt was no longer the powerful kingdom it had once been. Different rulers controlled different parts of the country. They competed with one another for power. There was no single leader strong enough to unite the land. King Piye saw an opportunity. But he also believed he had a responsibility. He saw himself as a rightful ruler who could restore order along the Nile. Around 728 BC, Piye led his army north into Egypt. City after city surrendered. Some rulers accepted his authority without a fight. Others resisted. But one by one, they were defeated. By the end of his campaign, Piye had achieved something remarkable. The king of Kush had become the Pharaoh of Egypt. For the first time in history, the rulers of Kush governed both kingdoms. This period became known as Egypt's 25th Dynasty. Today, historians often call these rulers the Black Pharaohs. But they were more than conquerors. They saw themselves as protectors of Egypt's traditions. They repaired temples that had fallen into ruin. They honored the ancient gods. They supported priests and religious ceremonies. And they worked to bring stability to a divided land. After Piye came other Kushite rulers, including one of the greatest kings in the kingdom's history, Taharqa. Under Taharqa, Kush reached the height of its power. New temples were built. Old monuments were restored. Trade continued to grow. The kingdom became known for both its military strength and its cultural achievements. But ruling Egypt was never easy. A powerful new empire was rising in the east. The Assyrians. They were one of the strongest military powers of the ancient world. Their armies marched into the region with powerful weapons and experienced soldiers. The Kushite pharaohs fought to defend Egypt. Again and again, they resisted. But the Assyrians kept advancing. Eventually, Taharqa and the rulers who followed him withdrew south to Kush. Their rule over Egypt came to an end. For some kingdoms, such a defeat might have marked the beginning of the end. But not for Kush. The kingdom was still strong. Its cities were thriving. Its people continued to build, trade, and create. Back in their own homeland, the Kushites turned their attention to something extraordinary. They built new cities, expanded their trade, mastered ironworking, and raised hundreds of pyramids across the desert. The kingdom of Kush had lost an empire. But it had not lost its greatness. In many ways, its greatest achievements were still to come. And in the next chapter, we'll discover why the kingdom of Kush became known as the land of the pyramids. Chapter 4. The Kingdom of Pyramids. When most people think of pyramids, they think of Egypt. The Great Pyramid of Giza, the Sphinx, the Pharaohs. But few people realize that just south of Egypt, another civilization was building pyramids of its own. In fact, today, Sudan is home to more pyramids than Egypt. Most of them were built by the rulers of the Kingdom of Kush. After the Kushite kings returned from Egypt, the kingdom entered a new chapter. Its capital eventually moved to the city of Meroe. Located further south along the Nile, Meroe became one of the greatest cities in ancient Africa. It was a busy center of trade. Merchants arrived from many lands. Goods traveled north to Egypt and the Mediterranean. Others moved south into the heart of Africa. The people of Kush traded gold, ivory, iron tools, animal skins, and other valuable products. Trade brought wealth. But it also brought new ideas and new opportunities. One of Kush's greatest achievements was its skill in working with iron. Its blacksmiths learned how to turn iron into strong tools for farming, hunting, and building. They also made weapons for the kingdom's army. Because of this, some historians have called Meroe the iron capital of ancient Africa. The people of Kush also developed their own writing system, known today as the Meroitic script. Although scholars have learned to read parts of it, much of the language remains a mystery. It reminds us that there is still much to discover about this remarkable civilization. Then there were the pyramids. Unlike the massive pyramids of Egypt, the pyramids of Kush were smaller and steeper. They were built as royal tombs for kings, queens, and other important members of society. Each one honored a life, a family, a legacy. Together, they formed vast royal cemeteries that stretched across the desert. Even today, they stand as silent witnesses to a civilization that refused to be forgotten. Religion remained at the center of life in Kush. The people worshipped many gods, including Ammonius, whose temple at Jebel Bako became one of the kingdom's most sacred places. Kings traveled there for important ceremonies. Priests offered prayers and sacrifices. The mountain itself was believed to be a place where heaven and earth met. Kush had become far more than a kingdom that once ruled Egypt. It was now a thriving civilization with its own cities, its own traditions, its own language, its own architecture, and its own identity. For hundreds of years, the Kingdom of Kush flourished. But history never stands still. New kingdoms were rising. Trade routes were changing. And challenges were gathering beyond Kush's borders. The civilization that had amazed the ancient world was about to face its greatest test. In the next chapter, we'll discover how one of Africa's greatest kingdoms slowly declined, and why its story nearly disappeared from history. Chapter 5. The Fall of a Great Kingdom. No kingdom lasts forever. Not Egypt. Not Rome. And not Kush. For hundreds of years, the Kingdom of Kush had flourished along the Nile. Its cities were busy. Its merchants traded with distant lands. Its craftsmen were respected for their skill. And its kings ruled over a proud and independent people. But slowly, the world around Kush began to change. Trade routes that had once brought wealth to the kingdom started to shift. Some merchants found new paths. Others looked to growing cities in different regions. As trade changed, Kush's economy became weaker. The kingdom also faced challenges closer to home. Keeping control over a large territory was becoming more difficult. Neighboring peoples competed for land and resources. The rulers of Kush had to defend their borders while trying to keep their kingdom united. Then, to the southeast, another powerful kingdom was rising. It was called Aksum. Located in what is now northern Ethiopia and Eritrea. Aksum became an important center of trade and military power. As Aksum grew stronger, Kush grew weaker. Around the 4th century AD, the Kingdom of Kush came to an end. Historians continue to study exactly how it happened. Some believe the Kingdom of Aksum dealt the final blow. Others point to changing trade routes, environmental pressures, and years of gradual decline. It was probably not one single event. It was many changes, happening over many years. One by one, the great cities of Kush were abandoned. The royal palaces fell silent. The temples were no longer filled with worshippers. The pyramids remained, standing quietly beneath the desert sun, watching as centuries passed. As time went on, the memory of Kush began to fade. Other kingdoms rose. New empires appeared. The names of Kush's kings were slowly forgotten outside their homeland. For many people, it seemed as though the Kingdom of Kush had disappeared forever. But history has a remarkable way of finding its voice again. Beneath the sand, ancient cities were waiting. Royal tombs remained untouched. Temples still stood against the passing centuries. And the pyramids continued to guard the stories of a civilization that had once ruled the Nile. The Kingdom of Kush had fallen. But its history had not been lost. It had simply been waiting for the world to rediscover it. In our final chapter, we'll travel to modern-day Sudan and see how archaeologists, historians, and local communities are bringing the story of Kush back into the light. Because some civilizations are never truly forgotten. They are simply waiting for someone to tell their story again. Chapter 6. Rediscovering Kush. Today, if you travel across the desert of northern Sudan, you may see something that takes your breath away. Rows of ancient pyramids rising from the sand. The ruins of temples where kings once prayed. The remains of cities that were once filled with merchants, craftsmen, priests, and families going about their daily lives. These are the remains of the Kingdom of Kush. For centuries, they stood in silence. Not because they had nothing to say, but because too few people were listening. In the last 200 years, archaeologists have uncovered more of Kush's remarkable story. They have explored the ancient cities of Kerma, Napata, and Meroë. They have studied temples, royal tombs, inscriptions, and everyday objects left behind by the people who lived there. With every discovery, a clearer picture has emerged. Kush was not simply a kingdom that lived beside Egypt. It was one of the great civilizations of the ancient world. Its people built thriving cities. They mastered ironworking. They traded across Africa and beyond. They developed their own writing system. They built hundreds of pyramids. And for nearly a century, their kings ruled as pharaohs of Egypt. Today, historians continue to study Kush because many questions remain unanswered. How did ordinary families live? What stories were written in the Meroitic language that we have not yet fully understood? What other discoveries still lie beneath the sands of Sudan? Every new excavation brings us a little closer to the answers. But perhaps the greatest discovery is not buried in the ground. It is the realization that Africa's history is far richer and more diverse than many people once believed. The story of Kush reminds us that great civilizations are not measured only by how long they lasted. They are measured by the ideas they inspired, the lives they shaped, and the legacy they left behind. For the people of Sudan, the Kingdom of Kush is an important part of their heritage. For Africa, it is a reminder of a past filled with innovation, leadership, and achievement. And for the world, it is an invitation to see history more completely. There are still many stories waiting to be told. Many kingdoms waiting to be remembered. Many voices waiting to be heard. That is why history matters. Not because it changes the past, but because it changes how we understand ourselves. Thank you for joining us on the African Archive as we explore the remarkable story of the Kingdom of Kush. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe to the African Archive and turn on notifications. Together, we'll continue uncovering the people, kingdoms, civilizations, and mysteries that shaped Africa and changed the world. Because history is not only about the civilizations we remember. It is also about the ones we almost forgot. And now, the Kingdom of Kush has found its place in the story once again.